And I wake up the next morning before I go off to like the guy that everyone wants to go get a tattoo from. And I look in the mirror and I'm like, holy fuck, it's crooked. I'm so bummed.
Hi, Brian Krause. Welcome back to another episode of the House of Halliwell, where we dive into episode 2.
This is Holly. Hi, how's it going? This is not my favorite episode.
Not your favorite episode in what sense?
So many things. Like the sports cars, and like it looked like we were like suddenly we switched to Baywatch nights, and like like there were so many things that were just a little out of bounds in this episode. Yep.
You look really enthused to dive into it.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's good things about it, but there's mostly.
Why don't we start with the good before we go all bad?
And the ugly.
Yeah, Leo. Well, let's start with Brian. Brian, what was your takeaway from episode 2?
You know, I don't have much. I don't remember it at all. So,
did you do your homework? And
I did not do my homework. No.
Okay.
I watched
Brian,
that as
Brian's
much as I
fired.
watched it back in '98.
But you got to watch it. I watched it. I had to watch it yesterday, which means you have to watch it yesterday or this morning.
You said had to, which means you thoroughly enjoyed it, right?
Have you watched any of the episodes yet?
Have I watched any of the episodes?
No.
I don't even. I don't. When the show aired, I really barely watched any as it was. So, no, I have not.
Okay, so Brian's done his homework.
Perhaps I got to do homework.
Yeah, guys, like this is kind of a pseudo. We have to know what we're talking about. But also, this is
I
gold.
thought I was off the hook because I wasn't. I wasn't in the
No.
first two episodes.
Wait a minute.
I'm
when
not.
you're not on camera, you're like blah 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 blah, and then me, and blah 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 blah, and then me.
Yeah, I wasn't in the show.
Okay, so we'll just Brian's here just for eye candy for you people.
I am. I'm just kind of listening.
Okay, you can listen. You can
as a
chime
fan.
in some. Okay,
I'm being a
Okay,
fan.
let's
I wasn't a
with
part
it.
of it.
Okay,
We're
let's
rolling.
just be objective. Drew, did you like the episode?
It wasn't my favorite episode I've ever seen.
Oh, weird. I wonder why.
Well, I'm going to look at my notes here.
Please do.
Oh, you had a great line, though. Thanks a lot, Mouth. Which I thought was pretty good. Actually, no, that was Shannon who said that.
That was
Shannon talking
to me.
To Alyssa. Or no, to you.
Me.
That was pretty funny. That made me laugh.
Me.
I didn't know you were a chef. I got to be honest.
Oh.
You weren't really a chef by the time I was around?
No, I had the bar.
You had a bar, but before that you were a chef. I didn't know. That was really
We
interesting.
had bar food.
Okay, so serious question. How quickly did you shoot episode 2 after you had shot the pilot? Like, you rolled right into it?
No, because we had the casting snafu.
Okay.
So there was that. And then we had to, fill in. Not only did we have to reshoot the pilot with our actual sister, but we had to make it from presentation form to episode form. So then after that, we rolled into this kind of rickety
episode.
Yeah, I mean, we were still trying to find our footing, definitely with the special effects and prosthetics.
Yeah.
Javna.
Yeah. Oh, actually, you know what? I have something great
no.
for this episode now that I'm thinking about it.
Oh, no.
Let me read you the description. Episode 2, I've got you under my skin. Phoebe can't resist a peek into the future. She and her sisters learn their first lesson in witchcraft. Deadly demons can come in any package, including gorgeous male photographers.
Gorgeous. Yeah, I mean,
Come on.
You'll see with the WB taglines that they're pretty impressive in very many ways. But aside from all that storyline, which is, sometimes that we call them the B storylines, the Demon of the Week storylines, they were not always the greatest because we had to come up with a new one every week,
That's part of the job, right?
Sure. But
sure.
To me, what was more important was the humanizing aspect of all these fantastical things, where my character was super concerned that if she was good or bad, questioning their morality and all the things. And it was really, really, really important to Aaron Spelling that the audience know that we were good witches.
Right.
And that we were sisters that just happened to be witches and not witches that were sisters. So to him, it was super important, the family aspect, the moral aspects, like even down to the point where if we were getting in a car, we had to wear a seatbelt. We had to put a seatbelt on camera,
Right.
or we would reshoot it. That was one of his things, that we had to be wearing seatbelts. We could not smoke on camera, and we could not have tattoos.
Were you a smoker?
Who, me?
Yeah, you. No, who am I? Who do you think I'm talking to? No, I'm talking. Holly Marie Combs. Were you a smoker in the 90s?
I might have
Cigarettes?
inhaled once or twice.
Okay, once or twice. What was your cigarette of choice?
I don't remember.
Like a Marlboro?
I do not recall.
Camel?
Ew.
Did they have American spirits back then? Interesting.
But
But also
no.
from the moral standpoint, like, does that dive into like you? One thing that stood out in the episode for me was that you were hating on both his sisters for like having casual hookups.
Well, that was again his morality. Like,
Okay, so you were the
he
moral
needed-
compass. We were establishing
Apparently.
early on that Piper was
then-
the moral compass.
Definitely, but then Piper goes way off the deep end, because like of the end of like season 1, she has like 6 boyfriends.
Jesus.
Yeah, it was a lot. It was
Spoiler alert.
There was like
Come
a
on.
revolving door. Like there was actually a point in time where I was like, so Piper's turned into a little bit of slut. And the executive at the time said
I don't
to
know
me,
if we're allowed to
"No,
say slut. Is that?
I am. I am
Are we allowed to
now.
say that?
I am now." Well, what rating does our podcast have so far?
Oh, well, I don't know.
Well, but yeah, no, I said she's kind of turning into a little bit of a slut. And the executive said to me, "No, she's just unlucky in love." And I said, "No, she's a little bit of a hoe. Ho, 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 ho." Hence,
She's on some
my-
hoe shit.
hence BK coming in hot.
Well-
And suddenly she was Sadie, married lady.
Uh-huh. Interesting.
Well, not so suddenly. It was a long road.
For someone who had not seen these episodes previously, it was interesting because I was like, I had started a creep counter as I'm taking notes. I'm like, God, this guy's creepy. Also, like
Creepy.
every dude seemed to talk in a transatlantic accent, which I thought was really funny. Like anyone who was interacting with Shannon was talking in a transatlantic accent. I was just like, what is going on? But like, I'm like, why is Stefan the photographer creepy? And then of course he turns out to be
The
like
guy.
the main baddie.
The demon.
The demon. But yeah, in regards to like the Charmed canon, I don't know if it was your strongest, not performance wise. You were wonderful, of course.
Oh, thanks.
All your choices were clear and concise. We knew your motivation.
You know what I do like about that episode? I do like the scene with Alyssa and I where we have that conversation, because I remember from filming it, it was like the first like real quiet scene between the two of us where we had this sort of heart to heart where we navigated the pathway of what our relationship was as characters. And it's very evident in that scene in the attic, sort of like the intimacy and the relatability that we had as people, as actors, and as characters is in that scene, in that episode. So there are bright spots in this episode.
No, absolutely.
For sure.
And it really does a good job of it, like highlighting and magnifying like the chemistry that you guys had. Like it's really believable that you are sisters. Like all three of you,
Yeah.
actually. Like there was truly, the chemistry was off the charts. I was like, oh yeah, I totally buy this. And
And
like
I didn't have any siblings, so this was all uncharted territory for me, for sure.
Wow.
You know, and I like that in this episode we did establish that we were there to help innocents and that we were there to be pseudo crime fighters, so to speak.
Now, at that point also in this, were you still finding your footing, like from a character standpoint, or did you pretty much, you have a clear kind of path
No,
forward?
I mean, in that episode, like it's really pretty concrete Piper in the kitchen where she's just freaking out because she freezes time with her power, and then the restaurant is still happening outside the kitchen doors. That's like prime Piper territory right there.
Okay.
That's when all her neurotic tendencies, and you know, I didn't really go to acting school. Like I took a few lessons. I had a super strict coach for a certain movie, and I didn't.
Who was your coach?
I didn't. Ernie Martin in
Ernie
New
Martin.
York.
Okay.
And I didn't really enjoy it whatsoever because it was very emotional.
What, the process? You mean the process of?
Yeah.
of working with a coach or the process of actually acting?
No, it was very method. It was very emotional. It was very digging deep, and I was very young at the time. And so, but what I did take away from it was I didn't really know what I was doing in trying to establish like this brand new character. So I would start with really simple things like a watch or shoes or a walk. And for me, the Piper walk was a very big deal, a very big indication. As you two know, I don't walk like she walks. And so that was pretty easy for me to, like, these physical, tangible things made it easier for me to create a character where I felt I wasn't really qualified to.
Okay.
Piper walk was a
Piper
big deal.
walk.
And Piper
BK,
walk
did you know?
is
BK,
on
did you know about
display.
Piper's walk?
I mean,
The
No.
clickety-clack.
If you didn't know, it's okay.
no, I didn't. I wasn't. No.
Well, when you watch the episode, you'll know.
Well, he doesn't. I mean, do you even need to watch it anymore? We're moving on.
I mean, not
you got to start
now
at
that I
3.
know there's a
That's
walk.
your homework.
There is a walk.
There is a walk for sure. But yeah, the pastor. That, by the way, the pastor with his creepy advice. It was episode 2. He says,
I was
"Put
like,
her
no,
to
you should basically
put her
you
to
should
the
die
death.
now.
She's evil." Direct
Yeah.
quote. I'm like, whoa.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's great.
Neil
advice or not.
Roberts was in that, and he wound up doing 6 episodes. Interesting.
Who was?
As a dark demon, right? Neil Roberts.
Which one was Neil Roberts?
He was Rex Buckland.
Who's Rex
Yeah, he
Buckland?
hung around for the transatlantic accent.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
The guy who was talking. Oh, the Prue's boss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We didn't have a lot of
Interesting.
arcing characters because Spelling at the time wanted every episode to be a standalone so that they could do reruns in any order that they wanted to. So it was really hard for us to get sort of character arcs approved at the time.
Right.
Yeah, but somehow, yeah, that one worked.
Did you get transatlantic accents approved? Was that something
Probably. That was probably a prerequisite.
Okay. That's a really tough accent to nail, I got to be honest. I'm around all the time when I'm at home, especially during the pandemic by myself. I would just talk in different accents and really tried to nail that transatlantic. So whenever I got that call up, hey, we really need a
call.
transatlantic, like, oh, I'm ready, coach. You can put me in the game. So one of my other notes, and you've talked a bit about it, was this existential struggle if you're good or not, which I thought actually really did resonate with your character, or at least for the first couple of episodes, you were trying to make sure that you were, and like you've talked about it now a bunch with Aaron, making sure that you guys were good witches. But it was evident, like it was really well played on your part. Like, all joking aside, it seems like tonally you were kind of pitch perfect. And so for that bit of it, I really enjoyed watching it.
Yeah, it was definitely a concern on our part. We didn't want to Aaron, it was a direct note from Aaron that they needed to be known as the good guys. And literally, like, we were not allowed to have tattoos. So between the, 3 of us at the time, we probably had about 10, and we had to cover them all up. We weren't allowed to really have tattoos until the later years. And we were just like, fuck it.
It's so funny. Tattoos have now become such a staple in culture and society,
Right.
where before it was kind of looked at as, a little
Especially
bit.
as an actress, you weren't supposed to have any because that just took time in the chair to cover it up. So you were less bankable.
And now you see people who like are covered head to toe, and they get there early, and they'll do those like time lapsing videos where basically someone comes in with like a giant airbrush
Spray paint.
and just spray paints their whole body. What were the tattoos that you had
Well, I had wrist tattoos and a shoulder. Alyssa had a shoulder. She had an ankle. Shannon
what was your
had an
shoulder? No,
ankle.
we're not talking about Alyssa or Shannon's. We're talking about yours.
My shoulder's been lasered, so it doesn't exist anymore.
But what was it?
No.
What?
Yeah.
No,
See,
no.
look at Brian. He's all of a
People
sudden
are literally,
engaged. He wants to
already,
know.
like, Googling it right now.
I
It's not
want to
okay.
know.
Oh,
By
hold
the
on,
way,
I'm looking
this
it
is
up right now.
This is the deepest of deep dives. This is what we
Is it?
promised
Is it?
the people.
It's really embarrassing.
Prison
Who
tat?
cares? I'll tell you
Okay,
my
so
tattoo story. I got a great one.
It's a really bad story. So my boyfriend at the time,
Yes.
I was in high school.
Yes.
My boyfriend at the time literally got my face tattooed
What?
on. Yeah,
Sweet.
my face tattooed on his forearm.
What did that look like?
Yeah.
In
It
the
looked like my face.
did it?
And so he had this big old rose tattoo on his shoulder. And clearly, after all of that demonstrative efforts of love, he looked at me and was like, "What are you going to get?" And so I got a replica of his rose on my shoulder, but it was like that big.
I remember that tattoo now that you say
do
it.
not.
Yes, I do.
I have a question on his tattoo of your face. Was it?
Yeah.
Was your chin closer to the elbow or closer to the wrist?
Wrist.
So was the face facing him or
No.
facing
Oh, he
out
had it
when
face
his
down
arm
the
was
proper
down?
way.
It was facing out the proper way, so as
Yeah,
if
yeah.
we were walking
Well, the proper
together.
way.
Well, the
But,
proper
So
way
other
is like
people could see it.
What always pained me for him, and years after that, is
Who is him, by the way?
No names. There's no names on location.
So he was looking down at you,
Essentially, yes.
But he'd go like this, and he could see her.
and then he'd pull it
Essentially.
up like
And then
that.
if she
but
pulls
then
it
he'd
up
have
like
to,
this, it's
Then
upside
then he'd
down.
have to hold it upside down,
But
right?
wait,
Like
but
Yeah,
that.
but
wait,
99% of the
what
time, your
killed
arm's
me-
hanging down.
But
So that's why there's a right and a
I'm
wrong
looking
way.
at the top of your head. I'd
Right.
rather have you flipped over with your chin's bottom, so I could be like this and kind of stare at your eyes.
That's too. Ew.
Wow.
You know what I mean? Like now
Wow.
we're face to face.
I don't know.
So basically,
That's-
he's married with kids now, and
Who?
and bless him and everything.
Who's married?
But literally, like I felt like when he hugged any prospective other people, like I was still right here.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Wait,
oh,
so
it was
you
on the
got
outside
a
even.
rose tattoo, and to honor his rose tattoo.
Yeah.
Okay, that was your first one.
Yeah.
Okay, what else we got?
My wrist tattoos. Everybody on Charmed has seen them because
Yeah,
we
but
used
just-
to have,
let's give-
we used
let's
to
do-
have look. We used to have bracelets that would cover them up. This is probably from Charmed, but they would always slip. It's like a game of like, where's Waldo? Like, how many times did you see our tattoos when you weren't supposed to?
Was there a butterfly on your wrist?
Yes.
Okay, just making sure that I remember that correctly.
That's also
I cannot believe I remembered that.
well, you were 12, so
That's true.
yeah.
Random tattoo story. So I had always loved them, and I never had any. And then during the pandemic, and at the beginning of the pandemic, when everyone was going to die and like 40 million people were it was it. Remember at the very, very beginning,
Game
like
over. Bill
game over.
Paxton,
I'm
game over.
outside washing groceries naked, like in my yard, literally scrubbing it down. So embarrassing. And I was like, man, if we're all gonna die, and I've always wanted tattoos, like what? Like, why the fuck did I wait? Like, who cares? Like, you can cover them up now, and it doesn't matter. And they're an expression. They're much more accepted than, like, let's say they used to be. And like, there's incredible artists out there that didn't exist in the same way, like the single needle kind of like hyper realism. And so I was like, fuck it, I'm getting a tattoo. I've always wanted them. I want to get them. And I have a friend who's friends with one of like the biggest tattoo artists in the world. And I call in the favor, and I'm like, hey, can you make a call to Dr. Wu? And they're like, yeah, I got you. But I was so nervous about it that I couldn't stop thinking about how much it was going to hurt.
Wow, Drew. Wow.
I know. I'm admitting this. Look, I'm taking ownership of this. Okay.
Well, where did you put it?
Well, just hold on. This is not like there's a story.
Well, some places hurt more than others.
Well, I was gonna have it on. I was gonna do it on my chest. Like I didn't want anyone to see tattoos, right? And so, I'm like the day before the tattoo happens, I'm so nervous, and I'm telling a friend of mine I'm directing this music video, and she's like, we had a fitting, and we were like at dinner, like had dinner in her place or whatever, and she was like, my side hustle's tattooing. And I was like, oh, really? She's like, no, for real, you can check out my Instagram. So I pull it up, and I'm like, oh, sure enough, she's a tattoo artist on the side, as well as being like an actress, model, photographer, whatever. And she's like, you're so nervous about it. Why don't you? She's like, I'll just give you one right now, and then tomorrow, like, it won't even be anything. And so I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm in. Let's do it. So at like 2 a.m, I have her tattoo something on like the side of my back.
You got a
Kinda
back alley tattoo?
Like where your rose tattoo was. And it didn't hurt at all. And I wake up the next morning before I go off to like the guy that everyone wants to go get a tattoo from. And I look in the mirror, and I'm like, holy fuck, it's crooked. I'm so bummed. So after waiting for forever, I'm like, I'm never going to make a mistake, because I now am old enough to know really what I want and what matters. The first one I fucking got was crooked. Unbelievable. And
Is it
so
still crooked? Maybe
What?
you evened out.
Oh no, I went and got it removed because I'm that kind of maniac.
Wow.
Oh, you got it
Yeah.
removed like immediately?
Like within
Dang.
1 week of getting it, I like made
Oh
an
my
appointment
gosh.
and got it removed because I was like, I cannot. It's like it's the dumbest
Yow.
mistake.
Savage. Did you at least take pictures of it?
Oh yeah. There's photos.
Okay, I'd like.
I'll
I'd
post
like
them
to see.
at some point. But it was. It cannot.
That's a whole nother Patreon level.
Yeah, it's
yeah.
it's just a crooked tattoo from my first one after
what?
waiting
Join
my whole
now
life.
if you want to
Of
see private tattoos.
Does it say
We don't
mom?
have to get into it.
Does it say mama?
Wow.
No,
Does it say
it said
love mom?
mommy,
Mommy.
but she spelled it with an IE. It was so awkward.
Baby.
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 Well, we're supposed to interview John Kretschmer. I'm sure he's going to show up at any moment, probably looking all dapper. And
Can't wait.
yeah, BK. Just a little homework for you for the next one. You got to
Watch yourself.
Episode 3. Episode 3 is called "Thank You for Morphing."
Yes, I
For
saved
not
this thing
morphing.
on charmfandom.com.
Yeah.
boy.
Also,
There's a-
aka
there's a
Brian
whole-
Krause's first episode, aka I have a better title for it.
Please
A
do.
lot of daddy dearest.
Daddy
Oh,
issues.
Jesus.
Yeah, daddy issues.
Daddy issues.
Yeah.
Daddy AF issues.
Now I have them.
Okay. Well, yeah, it's next time. But this time, what we got for you guys right now is an interview with John Kretschmer, who directed the first and second episodes. John, we've been doing this for an hour.
We're
7
good.
minutes.
I mean, we are a well-oiled machine.
I love that you are our first. You're a guinea pig. Thank
He
you for
should
being
be.
here.
I mean, because he did the first two, and I'm sure that was a well-oiled machine as well.
Two of 17.
You did
That's right.
17 of them.
17.
Wow.
Wow.
He was
I
a
think
mainstay.
I think Conway did 17 too, but I was, of all the independent directors, I had done the most.
Right. You weren't in-house, and it wasn't in your contract. We actually chose
And we
you.
loved you so much. It's true.
So John directed episode 1 and 2. They aired in October 7th in 1998. And
I don't know why you keep having to say the date. It's
because
super
I just want to
rude.
make sure everyone knows that I was 17 at the time.
Yeah, I know. You're still 17 in many ways. But anyway, John actually did 1B because there was a 1A. So we had to reshoot the pilot or parts of the pilot. And thankfully, John came in to be our savior.
The story from my perspective is that I was called in the spring of that year to direct the presentation or the 20-minute pilot or whatever it was.
Right.
And I was working as a producer on another show, and so I couldn't be released. Bruce Seth Green came in and directed the 20 minutes, and then there was a casting change. So almost everything had to be reshot. The only sequence that wasn't reshot was the scene in the elevator that you did, Holly, with the spikes.
Yes.
But I reshot everything else, and I felt very fortunate to do it. I had a great time on both episodes. Even though the second episode I directed, it was the third episode filmed, if you remember, because I had to prep that while you were shooting what became episode 3.
He was a very busy man.
So John, real fast. Now, most of the time, and I don't know if, forgive me if people already know this, but usually the pilot director gets to establish the look of the show and like the tone. Did you have a lot of leeway with that? Like, because if I remember, I'm watching these going, wow, they were so dark, like the way they were lit.
They were supposed to be, yeah.
Yeah, it was really cool.
Yeah,
Like,
well, I will say that Tommy Del Ruth, the cameraman
Yeah.
for the first 6 episodes, Holly, was he on the first
Something
6?
like that, yeah. He was great.
He's enormously talented,
Yeah.
and reviewing those 2 episodes, I was kind of struck at how beautiful they were. I mean, they were just gorgeous, and you guys were just lit so beautifully.
yeah.
Yeah, well, Tommy was a big deal. Tommy was a big deal at that time because you can see in a lot of our shots in the restaurant, he sort of pioneered that steady cam walk and talk through the hospital, actually in ER. So we were super lucky to get
Yes.
somebody so artsy, for sure.
Oh, wow.
Exactly right. And in fact, if you notice, I think it's like the second shot in the second episode is a very complicated Steadicam
Yeah.
shot with you and Alyssa. And Tommy was the one who helped design that. I considered that a gift from him, because I was going to do something much simpler, and he designed it in such a way. It was so complicated, and I said, "Can you really light this?" And he said, "Yeah, this is no problem." So we did it. I'm so happy. I still think about that shot to this day.
Yeah, I mean, and the lighting was great. It was dark, it was moody, it was everything that we wanted, and Shannon was a big part of that. And the look of it, and keeping it moody, and trying to make, every element sort of add to the storyline.
But in answer to your question, I was fortunate enough to have complete support for whatever I wanted to do, and so what little contribution I made was made without interference.
That's cool, because usually, again, once the look is established in the first couple episodes, that kind of sets the bar and the tone for the rest of the series. Now, obviously, with different DPs and stuff, it ultimately kind of evolved and changed. But those first episodes really do stand out in a way that I wasn't even aware of, because I had never seen those episodes before.
That's nice.
Well,
I know you.
Well,
were
yeah, no. Again, I can't praise Tommy highly enough.
Yeah.
And I think when Jonathan finally joined the show, he also upped the game.
He brought it back,
and concentrated on making the women look fabulous. That was something he put a great deal of importance on. In addition to the magical stuff and the dark stuff, he made sure that the women always looked fabulous.
Well, we were getting older at that point, so it was a necessity from the network.
Wait a second.
It was a note. They were like, "Wow, they look tired," and they were like, "Yeah, well, they've been at this for 6 years."
You guys never, even in the last season, you guys never needed any extra help. But he ensured that you were protected in that regard. I think.
So, Jonathan, in getting the show, had you worked for spelling before? How does the job come about on a pilot episode for a director like yourself? Is it something you knew some of the producers beforehand, or were part of the creative process in getting it all going?
Yes, my very first job as a first assistant director was at Spelling on a show called Matt Houston. And that's where I met Jim Conway. And Jim went on he was sort of a jack of all trades. Jim was both a writer, he was a writer, a producer, and a director, and excellent in all three. And then I did a pilot for Spelling in Hong Kong called Harry's Hong Kong, which didn't sell, with David Soul. And then I became a director, and Jim and I had maintained our friendship, and he had followed my career, and for whatever reason, he and Duke felt that I would be a good choice for the show originally, and then when I couldn't do it and they made the change, they brought me back, and I was very, very pleased and flattered that they did. I had started at Spelling in 1984. So I had an over decade-long relationship with them.
So just for the math, Drew, you were 7.
No, 1984. What do you remember? What month roughly? Because I was probably 3.
You know what?
In 1984.
Enough about you.
No, I'm just sharing.
Listen, you're not
I'm
even
sharing
alive
with
in the
the
show
people.
yet, so.
John, did you do other Spelling shows as well? I mean, you mentioned that you did 17 Charmed episodes over the course of the series.
No, I don't. I don't think I did any other than when I was an assistant director and I'd done Matt Houston and Harry's Hong Kong. Charmed was the only Spelling show I directed, but it was also, quite frankly, it was sort of toward the end of the Spelling regime.
That's true.
Aaron was relatively old, but I to this day I'm still friends with Jim and Duke. We have lunch together every few months.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
Any things that stand out for you in either of the first 2 episodes that obviously you talked about that kind of that one-er with Holly and Alyssa in Ep 2, but
in watching the 2 episodes last night, the things that struck me the most were both moments with Holly. One was in the first episode, she actually was in a phone booth, which just struck me as hilarious.
I know.
Yeah.
And why did Shannon had a cell phone, but no, I get the booth.
Yeah, that was hilarious. And then my favorite moment in the second episode is just a small moment when she goes up to the church. When you go up to the church,
I knew it would be this.
You open the door and you do like a Charlie Chaplin.
Totally.
It's like the door is pulling you aside. And you're sort of hopping on one foot.
It was a really heavy door. To the door's credit, it was. I had to work with it.
But it was just a beautiful moment, and then you go, "I'm good," and and I remember thinking on that take just how perfectly that was acted. It was just the absolute appropriate reaction for that moment.
You knew, but you also knew how hard that was for me. Like, for me as an actress to like erupt into joy, or basically like open a birthday present. Like, I was the one that was hired to cry. I was, the victim. I was like, the survivor. Like, I was not like, the funny one in any way, or the like, this is my chariots of fire moment. There's just no way. And nobody will get that reference but the old people. But
you proved them all wrong, didn't you?
In that moment. But
Yeah.
I felt comfortable with you enough to know I wasn't making a complete fool of myself when you were like, yes, that's it. The door almost pulled you over, but yes, that's it. So there was all that very organic, odd, uncomfortable emotion happening, for sure.
The other thing that stands out, and it sounds like I'm BSing you, but it's absolutely true, was the ease with which all three actors approached and delivered on their roles. I mean, I had to, direct very, very little. Everyone understood their parts, even in the first episode, and everyone, it was like everyone was putting on an old pair of shoes. One of the things that struck me about Shannon, and I've talked to you a little bit about this, Drew, was that she was the consummate professional, and that's not taking anything away from Holly or Alyssa, but I was, this was a woman who has been acting since she was a young girl, and she nailed it on the first take every single time. It was remarkable and a joy to witness, And I think one of the reasons that she and I got along so well is that I didn't try and beat a dead horse. When we got it, and we moved on.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah, we move on.
And I always appreciated that about her. To this day, I sing her praises to any director who asks about her. And Holly, I don't know if you know, I went up and I saw her up in Canada, and on the set of 90210.
Yeah.
It was just, she was so sweet to me. It was very moving to me. So I was so happy I saw her.
Yeah, no, it struck me as I was watching the first two again, just how inherently right we were at the time, because you know how that can be hard to find your footing and to find your voice, but how right we were at the time for the parts that we were playing, which is not like, touting my own horn there at all, because I saw the points where I struggled. Probably nobody else will notice the things that I noticed.
Also, Holly, I don't know if you remember, but I think it was during the shooting of the second episode, you guys received a pickup. Or if it wasn't during the shooting of the second episode, it was during the shooting of the third, of my second episode.
Yeah, I think it was
because I remember you. I was in the makeup trailer for some reason, and you at one point went, "We're a hit." The show hadn't even aired yet, but the CW guys picked you guys up. I think maybe it was after we turned in the director's cut of the first episode.
So it wasn't the traditional? It didn't follow the traditional model?
It was picked up very, very soon. And I think part of that is also because of Aaron's relationship with the network and his heft as a producer. I think he said, you want it or not, because if you don't want it, I'm taking it elsewhere. So.
That's what he said about me too. It's totally what he said about me. It was the first time that he had gone to the network, and he had Seventh Heaven, and obviously that was a big deal. But he had gone to the network, and he said to me, "This is the first time I'm going to the network and saying, this is my cast." Well, of course, the network said, "This is not your cast." And so they compromised on me, but we recast the younger sister, not once, but twice. And he basically said the same thing to the WB at the time. He said, "Well, this is Holly, and I'm keeping Holly. And if you don't want Holly, I will take her somewhere else." And Shannon said to me, he did the same thing with Luke. And,
exactly. I had this conversation with Luke before he died.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, Luke was devoted to Spelling. Called him the old man, but was absolutely devoted to him. Luke and I became very close on Riverdale, and his passing is a great loss to me personally. He was a dear friend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's true. Aaron did the same thing for him. You're absolutely correct.
Yeah, and it's kind of rare in this day and age. Well, David Kelly did it to a degree, like with Picket Fences, we had the same crews, and he took the same crews to his other shows. But those two I found are very rare in the way that we keep our directors, we keep our crews, and we just rotate them, and he keeps them. They both kept them employed, for decades. And thankfully, I got into both of those crews.
Mm. Yeah, no, I owe a tremendous amount to the Spelling organization. I mean, it gave me the experience as a relatively young director that I needed. And I was always happy to come back to the family, always.
Well, just that concept of someone championing you and believing in you, and it gives you the not even the courage, but it gives you this sense of like, oh, I belong here. Because so many times, I think, at least from an acting standpoint, there's a lot of questioning, like, I think a lot of actors suffer from imposter syndrome a little bit.
Totally. Especially when you go into a show that's already running.
Totally. And so when you have someone like an Aaron, or like a David Kelly really believe in you and go, hey, you deserve to be here, and I'm fighting for you as well, and go do your thing because this is what we love. It's a great boost of confidence, and it really kind of is freeing because it then allows you to just be focused on the work and not worry about the other stuff.
Well, it was a rare commodity also because of loyalty is not something that is often experienced in this business, and certainly experienced it at Spelling.
Yeah,
over and over again. I mean, I'm walking proof of that for having done 17 episodes.
Quick question about tone. I'm kind of going back to the show for a quick second. Was it always going to have this underlying comedic tone to it as well? Or was that something that Holly, you, Shannon, and Alyssa, and then ultimately Rose brought to the table? Like, when you guys shot the pilot or the first 3 episodes, obviously there was darker themes. We talked about how it looked, but this idea of this kind of underlying really kind of beautiful comedy, was that something that you guys all brought to the table? Was that something that was discussed?
Well, I'll give you my opinion, and then I'm really going to have to ask Holly and you and Brian, because you experienced more scripts than I did. But I felt that was inherent in the material that I was handed. What do you think, Holly? I mean,
the first script, the first 1A was a lot darker. I mean, come right out of the gate and kill somebody. At that time, like literally, that was super violent for the time. Even though we don't really show it, and we never really did, we had very strict parameters of like how we could show blood or gun at the time. Like I was super surprised in like episode 2 or 3 where somebody says bitch, and I was like, wow, we were really not allowed to say that then. 1A was pretty dark, and the original actress, shouldn't say it original, but yeah, original actress, Lori Rom was like this classically trained theater actress, and she was, just a different element. And then when Alyssa came in, there was a completely different lightness that Phoebe needed, that I think the show needed, and it metamorphosized a little bit when that happened. And I also felt, and I don't feel comedy is my strong point whatsoever, but because Shannon and I had history before, the human aspect between us was just evident, that the closeness was evident, and it showed a side of her people hadn't seen before. It showed a side of me people hadn't seen before, just because that was just the mix, that was just the chemistry. And I also think that by design it started to happen more and more, because my biggest concern was these circumstances are so crazy and out of bounds. We have to have some grounding things that are family and that are funny, so that we keep people engaged, instead of just being like, and then he explodes and the dust fades away. You have to have those grounding human moments, and it just worked. I mean, it brought out, Alyssa was always funny, but it brought out elements of Shannon and I where we were like, hey, this is kind of, who knew we could be kind of funny.
I want to bring Brian into this because we had several episodes in which the comedy was played up with your character. I think in particular of the episode where you're pregnant, which I have to say, and I've told you this before, Brian, but You were completely committed to that. And no, I'm serious. He took it very seriously, and there was no screwing around. He was 110% in on that role. And I admired that tremendously. And the other one I remember is when we did the Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs episode, and you had
spoiler
to
alert.
correct. You had to correct someone in the script. And say, no, they call themselves little people. I remember that moment so beautifully. But Brian has a great deal of skill in the comedic realm as well. And I think that was. Do you feel that was played up in your role, Brian?
You were funny by accident, and you were funny when you had to be, but you didn't want to be.
I get embarrassed when I try to be funny. It's weird. So I that's where I tend to play everything. Let's play it real and straight and
very real.
I'll be funny around you.
Look at Airplane. I mean that they're all completely straight, but it's one of the funniest movies ever made. So
exactly.
Yeah. Drew, you didn't have much opportunity to be funny, did you?
No. At this point, we're so early. We're like in episode 2, season 1. I'm not even a glimmer in my mother's eye yet.
You're an egg.
I'm not. I'm an egg.
Be a good egg. No, Drew is like the opposite of Brian, where he tries to insert the funny, where Brian is trying to reject the funny.
My default always is to go to joke in real life and in any jobs and anything that ultimately that I've written and directed. There's always an underlying sense of like absurdist comedy. It's just something that I've always kind of leaned into and loved and has inspired me.
Jonathan, did you find it hard to keep actors what needed to be real, what needed to be light, especially when they were dealing with, say a dragon or a Seven Dwarfs or whatever, and kind of guiding some of our guest stars or even us to a point of, no, this has to be real to make it believable. And how do you navigate that in our show where it's, you have these real moments, you have this comedic moments and deciphering so you get the right cut?
Well, again, my hat is tipped off to you guys and the other regulars who were in tune with the tone of the show initially. And they knew that when we did episodes with dragons and stuff, we weren't actually going to have any animatronics. So you guys had to use your imagination, but I could describe what I knew the creature was going to look like or going to be doing to you, and you guys just sort of figured it out yourselves. I didn't have to ride anyone too hard about making it real. I should mention to your listeners, if you look at the visual and special effects of the first 2 episodes and you compare them with what happens in later seasons, the sophistication of the show became so much more intense and fulfilling. For example, Holly, you remember in the first season we always had to freeze you guys when you had to stand still, and then we had to change the lights or something, and then we go unfreeze.
It was very physical. It was like everybody became a statue. It was red light, green light. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then that went out the window around season 3, season 4, as I remember, because they figured out how to do it much more simply. But
yeah, we figured out how to do a split screen. But yeah, we were like,
I remember we were all like, we don't have to freeze.
we didn't know half of the special effects in the beginning. Gratitude to our team. We didn't even know how to accomplish, in the first season. It was all very handmade. Like even like Brian's hand lights were like taped to his hand and they would fall off often. Like little light bulbs were taped to his,
always
literally.
Well,
that was the best one.
Again, to jump ahead without giving too much away, in the Dragon episode, there were, I think, 140 visual effects shot, which in a 42-minute show is an unbelievable number of effect shots, and yet they were accomplished without any problem whatsoever.
Yeah,
So-
and at that point, it was like, I had the baby at that point, and I'm so glad it was you, John, because you're like, okay, there's a dragon in the sky, and I was like, okay. And you're like, okay, no, look up a little bit more. And now the dragon, I was like, oh my God, with the baby.
Amazing. But if you think about it, like Charmed was kind of a special effects pioneer compared to like, let's say Game of Thrones and what we ultimately saw with that kind of show, that kind of budget, 20 plus years later. Like what you guys were doing early on was radical. It was so cool because we hadn't really seen stuff like that on the small screen. So
Yeah. There was no green screen when we started. I think we actually started on film. When we went to digital, I was like, what do you mean digital? So there was all these weird adjustments that we had to make basically while we were building the plane as we were flying the plane.
So John, real fast, your history of kind of before you came to Charmed, like I was kind of playing around on your IMDb, first AD for Steven Spielberg for Jurassic Park. What was that like? Like, this is now just me wanting to know because I never actually asked you about that.
It was a great experience because I was working with everyone on that film was the absolute best person in their department in the world. And so, I got to work with Stan Winston, who did the creatures, and Dennis Murin at ILM, who did the full-size dinosaurs, and then the physical effects were great. I mean, it was just great, and Stephen was in a great mood. We finished 13 days early, which is unheard of.
Wow.
Yeah, it's extraordinary, and I think the reason for that is I believe that Stephen was on the line for any dime that he spent over the $69 million on the budget. So he wanted to make sure that he finished early, and then he took whatever money he saved and shoved it into visual effects. And I think, you look at the picture now, I mean, 28 years later, it still holds up, I think.
Oh, 100%.
In any event, it also gave me much needed experience in the CGI realm so that I would be prepared to actually, when I became a director, to deal with that. And, I became a director on a show called Sequest, which had a lot of CGI. And so I was very comfortable with visual effects by the time that I came to Charmed. And so, in the discussions of how were we going to create certain effects, it was a vocabulary I was very familiar with and could deal with.
Yeah, it was definitely like, the CGI and our stunts too were two other added characters to the day, to every scene almost. I mean, we went from doing stunts to CGI to elaborate hair and makeup wardrobe. So it was a 3-ring circus for sure in a day.
I remember when I came back on season 3 and then all the other seasons after that, we rarely had a late Friday. I mean, we would still have a 7 o'clock call on a Friday morning. It was extraordinary. They were able to write to that and also stagger so that the women didn't have to all come in at once and therefore cause turnaround issues.
That was, which was great with our AD staff and, the producing staff and everybody kind of knowing going into that, and the production managing and JP being, it was a good machine that we had running there. So yeah, by the time I became a regular in season 2, I guess that's kind of how it always was. I knew I had a 6:45 call and didn't have to stay as late as the girls. Luckily.
Drew, what was your experience? Do you remember?
Oh no, I don't. I don't remember.
No,
I just
Drew remembers he just wanted to come in early and he stayed late. He was like, "Hey, how you doing?"
Yeah, I was in heaven. It was my experience. By the time I came on, the show had been, it had been established for, I think I was end of season 5. So it's
you should know this.
Very. That's why we're doing a rewatchable.
Where are your notes, young man?
I've only watched the first 3 episodes so far.
Fantastic.
Are we cute?
Very.
We were John, babies.
Yes, babies.
Far too.
Real fast, because I know we got to let you go. What are you working on right now? Is there anything?
I'm leaving for New Orleans in August, which is of course the best time of year to go to New Orleans.
Lovely.
It's a little cold. Make sure you pack a sweater.
Yeah, for the prequel to Supernatural called The Winchesters.
Well, John, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to join us. It's been a pleasure to catch up. It's so great to see you.
Great to see you guys. I miss y'all, and I miss working together. It's always. I have such, all of my memories are just so great of that multi-year experience. It was just wonderful, absolutely wonderful. And thank you for making my job so easy when I was there. I really appreciate it.
Well, you made it comfortable for us, and I have to say you're definitely one of the favorites for sure.
you're sweet.
It always felt comfortable on the set. I always kind of felt like an outsider a little, it's the girls' show, and you kind of brought me under the wing a little and made me feel comfortable, which was nice too. So thank you.
You're
Hate
welcome.
to tell you
You're welcome.
guys, but he does that to everybody.
No, I know, but
Yeah, don't feel
It's his
special.
skill.
No, it's
No,
true. It's true. It's an uncomfortable spot, and when you come in as a kind of a guest actor or being out there, it's you hope you're tied in with everybody to feel comfortable just on the set, and so you made it easier for sure.
Thank you. Well, it's part of my job description, really. I mean, because a relaxed actor is a creative actor. So, I mean, I appreciate that.
I've been fortunate enough to have you on my two big shows.
Mm-hmm.
You were a producer on Army Wives as well, and to kind of have you throughout my career with me has been amazing and so wild. Like
I look upon it as you being throughout my career. Hal, give Shannon my love, will you please?
I absolutely will.
I adore her. I truly do. Okay, guys. Love you. Thank you
love
very
you too.
much.
So
Thank you
much.
so much, John.
Thank you, John.
Take
See
care.
you soon.
Cheers,
Bye.
Hey,
guys.
team.
Interview 1 in the books.
Interview
He's
went
awesome.
down.
He
He's
is
so
awesome.
Great. We were super lucky.
Yeah, some directors you feel like they're kind of the principal. They're going to go back to the network
Totally.
and tell on us for messing around, and it always felt like he was on our side.
Yeah, there's a lot that like don't enjoy doing it. Like there's definitely like I had a sense some were doing it like for the paycheck and their DGA hours, and he's definitely not one of them.
No, he really does enjoy the process, and he likes talking. Like, he's very by the book in regards to how he sets up his shots and stuff. But if you ask him a question about your character or the motivation or what's happening in the scene, he loves to kind of get in there as well, which I always found really helpful too.
That's your kind of guy.
I want to unpack it all.
I want to ask all the questions.
I want to ask all the questions. I want to excavate every single like tiny little detail.
I know.
I love that. I mean, that's the best part.
Okay.
Okay. Look, we're not all as naturally as talented as you.
I'm
so
not naturally. I'm just stumbling forward.
So I got to get as much information as I possibly can to help me find the treasure.